Hey YouTube, my name is Alan Sanford. I go by CrashRC in the FPV community, and today we're going to build this quad on a budget.
I'll get the part that went over here.
We're going to jump right in here and get on this build. We're going to get this frame here situated with a PDB, XT60 connector, and some motors on here. And I guess that's about all we'll get done today. This particular frame I picked up a while back. It's an HSKRC TWE 210 millimeter wheelbase. Got it off Banggood. I got it for a little less than $20. I think I may have paid a little bit more than the $15 I'm showing on the screen here. But anyways, I've already got some of the standoffs for the flight controller stack, and I've also got some of the standoffs for the top of the frame here already put together. And that's where we're starting. There's the top on the left, and it's worth noting that the notch on the bottom of the frame is the back of the quad, and the notch on the top of this frame is the front of the quad. So don't get those confused. It only goes on there one way, and so when you start putting it on there, you'll figure it out. But there's the PDB. It's a DJI. PDB is stamped DJI. I've already got the XT60 connector there soldered up. I sort of did that off the screen ahead of time. I got this stuff together at different times, and I already had the PDB and the XT60, so I just went ahead and married them together. But there's the the PDB board. I got it off of Banggood also. I got it for about $1, so I couldn't say no. But some of you may be asking why we're putting a PDB, why we're putting a PDB, a PCB, whatever. It's a little power distribution board. Some of you may be asking why we're doing that, and that's because on this build, even though it's 2020, we're gonna do ESCs on the arm. It's kind of an old school style build. We're not putting a 4-in-1 ESC on here, and I'm just sort of putting the screws on and getting this power distribution board put down on top of the quad here. And you'll see the XT60 is going to stick out. It's going to kind of go on that notch, and we're going to actually put some zip ties on the back side of that quad where this XT60 is at right here. So there we go. We got the PDB in place, and we're just going to secure it down with some needle nose pliers. And you're going to notice that I've got a few things laying around the external there. Got my soldering iron already going. It's got a dirty tip on it. You'll see here in a little while. I'll have to stop and clean that up. But I've got some flux right there in a can, so I can clean up my tip of my iron. I can also. But here's the motors. I chose iFlight XING 207 1800 kV Unibell motors from Race Day Quads. They're not the newest and latest, but they were the first motors to do the little washer inside. They also meet the power requirements. They also meet they're not too powerful for the ESCs that I'm going to put on here. And so I married these motors to the ESCs, and I'm also doing a 5S build. And the T-motor props that I have for this thing is the 5143S props that I have for this build. They can go up to a 1.7 kilos. I like T-motor, and T-motor puts on the package. They're like, oh, these props are good for. It says thrust limitation 1.7 kilograms. So if you do the thrust examination of these 2207 iFlight motors, you'll see that with a 6S and a 6-inch prop, they pull less than 1,700 grams, less than the 1.7 grams for the props that I've got going here. I also got a set of dial props. I don't like the dial props as much as I like the T-motor props that I have. But, so I know Joshua Bardwell, I think it is. I think he loves the dial props. But to each his own. I just don't want something that's gonna give when I give a lot of throttle. And so the props, the ESC and the motors, they're married real well to each other. So the thrust limitation of the props, the I didn't talk about the amp draw. So I got 35 amp ESCs, and we'll see that in the next video. I'm going to put the ESCs on in the next video, but I'm putting the motors on right here. But the thrust limitation of the props being at 1,700 grams, the 6S with a 6-inch prop. Now I'm doing a 5-inch build, so it's not going to be a problem. But with a 6-inch prop, let's just say I did that, a 6S with a 6-inch prop, then the amp draw at max, they pull right at 35 amps continuous. Now these are rated for 35 with a 40 peak, so we're well within limitations. It marries perfect, so I'll never pull more amps than the ESCs can draw theoretically, and the props sustain enough thrust. I can put as big a prop as I want on the build, and so I've got several different props, but what I'm going to fly mostly is the Dow prop 5045s or the T-motor props that I got, which was the 5143s. I really like the T-motor props. I got some 3-inch T-motor props on a 3-inch build, and I love those things. The props, oh, you hear my battery charger going off in the background probably. But anyways, I just love the T-motor props. So right here I'm trying to get all the screws in, and here in a minute I'm going to realize that we've got some length problems with the screws. The screws that came with these motors are too long for 4 millimeters, and these motors, they touch the windings in a spot. The windings are coated and covered with I think it looks like a heat shrink, but still I didn't want to risk it. So I had an old broken 3-inch frame that actually used the same size screws, the M3 screw, but shorter. And so I was like, well, that's perfect. So I don't do it on video here, but I notice it later. You'll see on video here in a minute, I'll start looking at them, and I'll start poking at them with a little file, and I go, they're touching. And I'll point that out to you in a minute. But I'll let you just kind of enjoy me kind of fiddling with these motors and getting them on there for a minute, and then I'll come back and talk about it a little bit more in a minute. Wait, I forget. Some of you may be new, and so some of you may be asking, what happens if the screw touches the wire up inside the motor? Well, what happens if the wire touches you're grounding it out, you're shorting it out. You can cause an issue to burn your motors out. You can cause an issue to maybe start a fire. You can cause an issue that might burn out your flight controller, your ESCs, all of the above. But basically, it completes the circuit between the motor and the carbon fiber frame, and a carbon fiber frame is conductive. And so you're really asking for a lot of problems if you let those screws touch. So we've got to address that, and I do address that, but I just don't do it on video. So I guess we can talk about some more things in the build. I got a F7 flight. I got an F7 flight controller for it. I've got the AKK Ultimate VTX. We'll be putting that on there later. I got a TrueRC circular polarized antenna for us, the long one that I put in there. And I don't put it on there in this build video. I actually put the whip antenna on there. I think some of the actual first footage is with the whip antenna. If I put some flight footage on here, I don't know if it's going to be with the TrueRC or with the whip antenna. We'll see. I may put both. I don't know. But the ESCs, they're the Racerstar 35 amps. And the flight controller is the JH. We'll talk about that in another video, but it's an F7 flight controller. And then I put a RunCam hybrid on this build. And initially when I set it up, I had some jello in the HD footage. The FPV footage doesn't have any jello. The HD does. And I'm wondering if it's just that the FPV footage is just so bad I don't see the jello. You know, I mean, because sometimes you can have jello and you just don't see it in the FPV because of different lighting things or whatever. But it's not real bad in the HD video. It's just there. You can see it every now and then. But anyways, oh yeah, and the battery, it's a 5S 1300 milliamp. It's our RDQ series, the Race Day Quad series batteries. So I'm going to be flying Race Day Quad batteries a lot. It's a 100C 5S. I love it. And then I'm going to try to get some more. I'm going to try to pick up some more batteries for it later. But anyways, the XT60 I got came with a capacitor, but the ESCs that I have, they also have individual capacitors. So I'm not going to put the big capacitor where the battery comes in. But you know, so this right here, I'm about to discover the problem with the screws being too long. You'll see me fidgeting here, so I'm starting to tighten everything down. Initially, I just put the screws in there. I didn't tighten them all down. I just sort of made sure I got all of them in there. But now I'm going back and I'm trying to tighten them all down, getting them real tight like they're supposed to be. And that's when I'm going to discover that the inside 2 screws touch the windings. I'm going to notice it, and then I'm going to like go ahead and screw everything down, and then I'm going to notice it again, and then I'm going to pick up a little round file, and that's when I'm going to discover that they're really touching, and I make a decision to change those screws. But while we're looking at the bottom of this quad, I do want to point out one thing. Those screws stick down, and the screws stick up on the top. There's no place to mount your battery that the screws won't poke into the battery. However, if you get some UMA grip and cut it around the screws, so that it goes in between the screws but sticks to the frame, it is actually tall enough to protect your battery. So UMA grip is a must with this build. So this is where I really noticed that I've got a problem. Yeah, Alan, those screws are way too long, man, and they're sticking up, and you're gonna have to do something about it. Like I said, thankfully I had an extra build that had a broken frame, and I still had the screws from it, and the screws were shorter, same size screws, but shorter, and so I just replaced them with those. I don't do it on the video, but I do it. So. No, I'm not filing it there. Don't worry, I'm not filing it. But here, this will be a good place to take a stop. In the next video, we're going to put these Racerstar 35 amp ESCs on there. And last but not least, a little sample test flight. This was the second flight that I made with it. Whip antenna, the Dow Prop Cyclone 5045C prop, Fat Shark goggle, Fat Shark Scout goggle, and a Jumper T16 Pro radio. Enjoy.
Now we won't go back home today, until the very last hour. We still got a few more days to slay, it's gonna get so much louder. Now we're here to take control over your body and over your soul. We're gonna take back everything and lose it all, lose it